Welcome to episode 2 of Bite the Apple, where we're taking a bite of the apple of truth. Joining me today, Pasquale,
Hello there.
my guy Kevin. Let's get into it, Kev. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I think it's worth talking about just the current market and also just the money system in general. I think in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of discussion about governments around the world wasting taxpayers' money, citizens not really standing up for, you know, I think there's a lot of change that's happening. And there's also just a lot of exposure on all the corruption that's gone on simply since the 70s in terms of governments just laundering money out of the system at the taxpayer's expense. And I think finally people are growing a backbone and they're learning about it. And as we learn about it, then we have to act on it and change. Because what's not fair is you look at it around the world, there's countries that pay 40% income tax. So 40% of your hard earned money and all the time and all the work you put in gets siphoned away to an organization that sends it overseas or sends it for their own process or benefit, and they're not actually doing anything for you.
Yeah.
They're just simply stealing all your time and energy, and we're buying into a system that simply we allow this to happen. And at some point we need to put our foot down and say no, because 80 years ago or even a couple hundred years ago people were burning down boats in cities because there was a tax on tea.
Throwing tea in
And
here.
nowadays, we don't do anything and we get taxed 30 or 10 times the amount or 30%.
Yep.
And at some point, people need to realize that the monopoly money system that they run is also a scam. They print as much as they want, whenever they want. They have no remorse for someone making 60, even 100 grand a year. And they just launder it all away. And at some point, there's not something's going to give, and when something gives and the money system falls apart, everyone gets affected. And believe it or not, probably the people that have money initially and are used to a comfortable standard of life, they're going to suffer the most because they're not going to be able to handle the collapse. And the theme of this episode, or the title we should say, is Monopoly Money. Because I think what's really funny is if you look at Monopoly, one of the most well-known board games in the world, Monopoly has rule number 11, which is the question, what if the bank runs out of money?
That's a great question, Kev.
And yeah, that's
a great question.
rule number 11 on Monopoly is what if the bank runs out of money? And here's what it says. Here's the answer. Some players think the bank is bankrupt if it runs out of money. The bank never goes
Some
bankrupt.
players.
Some.
Yeah, some players. Yeah, this is going to tie directly into what's going on in the world. Ready? The bank never goes bankrupt. To continue playing, use slips of paper to keep track of each player's banking transactions until the bank has enough paper money to operate again. The banker may also issue new money on slips of ordinary paper.
IOU.
IOU, and that's what's
Is
going
it
on.
monopoly or U.S. economy?
Yeah, no, that's every economy from Europe to China to the U.S. is the countries have all run out of money because what's happened is from the gold standard, when we all depegged off the gold standard in the 70s, they basically said, oh, we can do anything at free will. We don't have to constrain ourselves. And for decades and generations, we've allowed this to happen. And the current money supply, just for reference, is around 19.3 trillion, and nearly 25 to maybe 30% of what we actually know has been created since January of 2020. And that's reported data. We don't know about the hidden money. We don't know about like banks or institutions that may have been granted trillions of dollars that we don't even know about. And since 2009, so right after the 2008 financial crises and crisis around the world, more than 12 trillion of the current money supply has been created. So that's basically like 2/3 of the current money sitting out there has been created in the last almost 15, let's just say 15 years because we're early into this year. But like that's absurd.
It is.
And who's going to pay for that? The people that weren't even born yet and the people that were born just, in the past decade.
Most people don't think it'll ever get paid. And I mean, a good example of how these banks play monopoly is, I mean, you see the U.S. national debt's at $36 trillion right now. and Citigroup Bank just accidentally credited one of their clients with $81 trillion, and multiple employees missed this error. Bro could have paid off the debt twice. Like,
Just have a couple numbers on his phone.
Well, obviously that's a mistake by the business, and they corrected it.
but how can they do that if they don't even have, how could you do such a thing if you have no $81 trillion on hand? Obviously, there's no shot they have anywhere near, maybe not even like $2 trillion or $1 trillion itself.
The money supply is 19.3 trillion circulating.
It's
So-
4 times that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Four
just
times
ridiculous.
the whole U.S.
That's ridiculous that they can even type that number into a computer and make it happen.
Exactly.
It's straight monopoly.
It is monopoly. They can, like Rule 11 says, the bank can issue new money on new slips of paper, right? So we have the Federal Reserve that issues it to the banks that then distribute it. So there's a channel of command from the Federal Reserve to the banks to basically force people to obey the system. And if you don't obey the system, you can't have food, you can't have water, you can't have a house, you can't have clothes. So for centuries, we've been indoctrinated to buy into this.
Mhm.
And in the last, it's worked well for many generations, right? Fantastic. But then in the 70s, when Nixon got us off the gold standard, where it restrained the Federal Reserve and restrained these banks from going crazy like they have to back it to something. And now it's not back to anything besides belief. And there's been enough education and enough generations to buy into the system to the point that nobody's taking a stand. Not even, politicians like Doge and Elon Musk and Trump, whatever you think about them, it doesn't matter. There's not a single group of people, there's not a single institution or business that's ever going to be able to stop what's happened.
Yep.
And the only way it ends is the whole system collapses.
Well, the people just have to not want to put up with it. And I think one good example of us seeing, how we got indoctrinated into this and, on paper is in 2000, the average home buyer age was 32.
Yep.
You expect to get a home by almost age 30.
Yeah.
You get out of school, you get a job. And this was
Save up.
this was in the age when you could do it almost on a single income. You didn't need both household incomes in order to do this. And now we're getting to a point where the average home buyer age is now 56.
I gotta wait half my life before I can
Yeah.
afford to buy a house.
So, and that's up from 38, which was just a few years ago. That's ridiculous. People expect to live free, enjoy their lives here in the United States, but how are you going to do that when
You're so restrained by a financial burden.
affording a home has become a dream, the American dream?
Yeah.
The American dream is slowly changing into a fucking shithole. And
Yeah.
no one wants to be part of the dream anymore. So obviously we're due for some sort of rebellion /
Reconstruction.
collapse.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to happen at some point, and it's going to be ugly. But the irony of all that is when it does collapse, the people that get upset the most are misinformed. So they're not even actually going to go after the people that have caused all of this.
And that misinformation, it ties right back to that. The money value comes from your psychological belief. It's
Yeah, no,
brainwashing you. It's getting you to think that, all right, I'm working hard for 5 days a week to get my money, but where's that actual value? Where am I going to really be able to benefit?
exactly. And they'll just print more money, and then your money that you work for is worthless. So they're exploiting your time, which is way worse than all the stuff we've already spoken about. And I mean, what's really interesting is no matter where you stand politically, there's an American oligarchy going on. There's these elitists on both sides who are playing 95% plus of the populace to believe that one side is better than the other and vice versa. And by doing so and creating this super duality of a two-party system, everyone is distracted and believes that one side can fix their problems. But in reality, is if they fix the problems, then they don't have control.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the government has to create problems so that way we don't have any control of what's going on.
Yeah, and control is like you feeling the financial burden of I can't buy a home. I need to save money. I can't even afford to get groceries now. The same way that I used to 5 years ago. I can't even eat the same way. That's a form of control. It's financial crippling, and I mean, we look at it now, and they say only 2-3% of homes and stuff is owned by LLCs and big corporations, but in reality, it's about 15%, and that's control over a market. 15%, you can do whatever you want with the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Airbnb is one of the businesses that really bootstrapped that whole thing, because we had in 2020 we had 0% interest rates, but 0% interest rates meaning that banks were able to leverage it the most, not ordinary people. And then what we had was Airbnb, where you've created a full stack platform where people can use those properties that they purchase at stupid low interest rates,
Yep.
and rent it out with very little maintenance and operation. And it's a service on the internet that we're able to streamline profitability. So it was like a huge storm, and it's great if you already have property, but if you don't, you're screwed.
Yeah, here's a good thing I found. 40% of Airbnb of apartments that are rentable are rented out via Airbnb. So 40% of the the housing within cities and heavily populated areas being completely wiped out, because the people that the top percent that do have the money to spend on that are going to.
And a lot of places too, it's like vacation areas too, and who's gonna use those?
Yeah,
the most?
there's case studies of Airbnb completely destroying, crippling economies where people live, because those people could never afford to rent those homes.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
Not the ones who live there. It's
And
all the vacation people. Oh, it's summertime. Let's go rent a house over by the beach.
But what it does is it scales up, the living in that area, and these people,
Restaurants,
they can't
all
afford
cost
to live.
goes up,
Yeah.
everything.
And what's really interesting is future generations stand nearly no chance to ever break out of this system.
Yep.
I mean, let me give you an analogy here, right? Like, let's say we're all playing a game of Monopoly, and a few players who are older, they get to have 5 to 7 turns before younger players. So older players are people who have been born 40 to 50 years ago when all this scam wasn't going on.
They've gone around the board a few times.
Yeah, they've gone around the board a few times, and then we're born.
Did that go
right? And by going around the board a few times and having more time in a favorable market that hasn't been exploited by trillions of dollars, and we're not making excuses like Gen Z isn't going to stand a chance. We're just saying that these people have had many goes around the board. They've collected money.
They bought all the properties.
Exactly.
They start putting hotels and houses on them.
And
the costs go up every time you land on them.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I gotta stay here tonight.
Exactly. So by the time we start the game and we're 5 to 7 turns back, we stand statistically way less of a chance to ever compete.
Yeah.
And the system has also changed a lot. Way back then, the taxes were way lower. The taxes are way higher now. Way back then, they had something called the gold standard. Or even when they went off the gold standard for 10 to 20 years, it wasn't radical printing trillions of dollars left, right, and center. So what's happened is not only has this game gone on where they've had multiple turns ahead of us, they've also had favorable outside forces, from taxation to spending to buying to loans. And then nowadays, anyone who's young basically is inheriting this broken mess. And what's really interesting is the education system has brainwashed majority of Gen Z to believe that we stand a chance. But all it takes is a few people to educate enough, and that's why we're doing this podcast, is if people understand how rigged the game is, there will be a call to action at some point. And that's when things get ugly. We're not calling for violence, but you look at human history and generations and thousands of years of human history. The Romans lasted 1,000 years and ended because of something very similar to this. The Shang dynasty in China ended 200 years. Egypt, sub 500. So the U.S. is 250 years old. It could last a couple hundred more years because they figure out a way to change the money system or make it a little bit more fair. But all it takes is a generation to be fed up and then things change and empires collapse. And empires collapse due to the money system failing the younger generations. If you empower the younger generations to actually understand how rigged it is against them and how unfair it is, and they voice their opinion and they don't let older generations say, no, it's fine, it's you need to work harder, you need to do this or that, then things change.
It's about putting those brains together to actually find that solution. I kind of want to go back on the education thing that you were saying, where for me, an example, I went to college 4 years, but the thing that got me my job now is a stupid summer certification course to get EMT certified, right? That's what got me my job, because that's my certification level. Yeah, my education just made me look better, but the true worth was the $1,500 course, not the tens of grand that my family's put into college, right?
Yep.
And that's something's backwards there, right?
Yeah.
What is the true purpose of me going to school for that? Money.
Well, that's the thing is universities, they don't teach you hands-on stuff anymore.
No, exactly. I learned more being in the field than I ever did in any of my classrooms, and it's like
went to school for finance. I dropped out of finance because they weren't teaching finance. They were doing no hands-on stuff.
Exactly.
Just teaching me the bare
it's
basics
just
that
another
they've been
way.
using for 40 plus years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and then the cost is exponential for college too. So they need
like non-negotiable thing. You need the education, but where is the benefit from that?
The society needs people to do that, so that way the odds of them ever escaping becomes tenfold harder because you have student loan debt.
And like, you know how much more beneficial education would be is if you combined it in that work-centered, kind of like an apprenticeship mixed with
like
education.
A trade school.
Exactly.
But like your trade.
Where I'm getting experience in the
finance or
classroom
whatever you
of knowledge base, and then I'm applying it in the actual workspace.
Yep.
With whether it be unpaid internships that are connected to the school. I don't know what the best way to do about it is, but there's like that also is feeding into that monopoly sense where it's all for money. It's the brainwash to get you to stick to that timeline and to that work-centered, keep working for your money.
Yeah, I did a digital marketing degree. My final project to get my degree was to make a social media page. Like what aspect of that helps me in the real world? You know,
spent 4 years training to make that social media campaign.
Oh yeah.
You needed all 4 of those years.
It was a mean social media page. Definitely didn't lie about all the views and likes I got so I could get an A. Whoa.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is the education
what a bullshit
system,
project.
It's so dumb because
it's backwards.
It is super backwards, and then all the education and all the classes, it's just getting people to buy into getting a good high letter in the alphabet.
Yeah.
It's not teaching any value, and the way to get that high letter grade is to conform to what the professor is pushing down you.
Dude, I hear what my friends are doing to get their MBA right now, and it sounds like a fucking joke.
Yeah.
They've spent 2 semesters in South Korea. Like, yeah, I know you ain't working for no South Korean businesses over there. There's no way you can fucking speak any of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's all just draining people's finances at an early age.
Education.
Yeah, and ensuring that people are basically indebted forever.
Yeah.
And
stuck in the system.
Yep. And speaking of debt, right? You said there's like 36.3 trillion in debt. Well, that's like debt that's reported. It's more like 60 to 70 trillion because that's government obligations. So you look in the past 15 to 20 years, there's like trillions of dollars of obligations on top of that debt that aren't reported, that aren't tracked. And the money system that we're reporting, like, 19.3 trillion circulation, whatever, those are all like hypothetical numbers, right? The internet doesn't even know how much money is out there.
Think about military spending. On their budget sheets, they write that a simple screw and bolt costs $90,000. No matter how big that bolt is, no way in hell the steel is worth $90,000 to create that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just the money laundering, like you were saying earlier. It's a way to hide the actual spending on what it's for.
Exactly, and it just goes back to Rule 11 of Monopoly. Like, if the bank runs out of paper money, they just make more paper money, and there's just no confinement and there's no constraint in what that is. And I mean, Elon and Doge can do whatever they want. And Elon, on a recent podcast elsewhere, he admitted that he can't go after all this corruption because he will die and then the mission will end.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
This has been going on for tens of years, like decades, even like generations, that it's impossible to stop. And when it'll stop when there's just a massive collapse of society, and we don't want that either. I'm not calling for a collapse. I'm not calling for people to grab their guns and kill every politician. But you look at human history, that's just what happens. The Roman Empire collapsed, and everyone thought they weren't ever going to end. And it collapsed because leaders just took advantage, and the system just got so greedy and so corrupt. And anyone with a medical prescription, when something like this happens, they're just not going to be able to survive. So that's another thing is the healthcare system.
It's so fucked, man.
It is so messed up because 20 to 30%, maybe even higher, are reliant on a basic medical prescription to keep them alive on a daily to daily basis. So if they lose that because a money system collapses and the empire goes rogue, I mean, 20 to 30% of the population's already
And
neutralized.
you want to know something crazy about healthcare? The U.S. is the only country that advertises like pharmaceuticals. So any drugs or anything like that. Why do we need this advertisement from this big company to tell us what we need for our own health? Why can't our healthcare system be built in a way that, all right, this is exactly what you need. No more name brands to confuse people for the 3 different names for this one drug. Make it simple.
It's too much money.
It's all it is. And why do companies need to compete for who's spending more money on their drug when it's the same thing with just a different inactive part? It's
That's
just attached to an inactive compound. That's what's making it.
Look what Scarelli did. Scarelli got infamous because he went into the biomedical field and he bought a company and he changed one little thing on the prescription in the compound, and then he went and upcharged it 700+%. I don't even know how much.
It was ridiculous.
But that's what made Scarelli infamous, and he really, in reality, just exposed all of the people that own those companies and what they do, and changed one little thing.
He wasn't the first one.
You can charge whatever you want.
He wasn't the first one. He's just the one that got the spotlight for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy because if you make a drug, if I'm not mistaken,
Put him in jail for that shit.
you have you have
Should all be in jail.
You have 7 to 10 years where nobody else can copy it.
Yeah.
So you essentially have an agreement. You have 7 to 10 years to monopolize the crap out of this thing and make everyone feel like they need to have it.
Advertise
And even if you don't monopolize
market.
it, you have 7 years of infinite revenue.
Yeah,
in a sense.
that's what they're. It's crazy.
And then you have a base to build another new drug where it's probably going to be the same fucking thing with a different inactive compound.
And that's the thing.
And your 7 years restarts.
and that's
You
another.
like this Racinopil?
Yeah.
Well, now we're going to call it Levoplexin, and it's
Yeah,
the same
literally.
thing, but better.
And then what's crazy is these pharmaceutical companies, these doctors that prescribe them, if they don't prescribe enough and they have quotas and they say they don't have quotas, they absolutely
they
do.
do.
They don't care. And
You're
if they
paid. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, they make like you probably make commission off it in the back end, and they say they can't do that, but
The way they do it to get the loophole, at least in the ED, is it's the number of patients you treat, right? So we have PAs at the hospital that aren't kind of care about the patient, but are worried about, all right, this is what we're going to give you, we're going to do this, we're going to move on to the next patient, so I can hit 25, 30 patients today, and then for my next sign on my contract, it's going to go up a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not going to lie, some of our worst PAs make the most money.
Yep.
Not the ones who are actually helping the people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just become like how many can I pump out and how many prescriptions can I
Yep.
like it doesn't matter which ones they're prescribing, but just how many.
Yep, the medical system does not care about your health. And if everyone was healthy,
Doesn't something
Then
sound
they
wrong
wouldn't
with
be
that
making
statement?
money.
yeah, I mean it's
And
backwards.
it's like,
Yeah. It's totally backwards. And that's just like one rabbit hole we went down very briefly there. Every single industry has some element of corruption of that degree that's accelerating the collapse of the whole currency system.
Yeah.
And people are probably listening and being like, "You're a crazy conspiracy theorist. Just look this stuff up." I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that we spend trillions of dollars in healthcare, and that healthcare isn't performing at the level that other countries
Dude,
lower expenses.
go look at the tribes out in like the Amazon in
Yeah.
Africa. Some of them have an average lifespan of over 100 years.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
It's like
And
actually,
It's all also community based living.
yeah,
We know
and home remedy.
this
natural
group of
remedy.
people has this strength, these people have this strength, and you have these groups creating a sustaining life or community, I guess.
I watched a video the other day. There was a bunch of people living on an island that's maybe 2 football fields wide. This thing is tiny, middle of the ocean, completely super densely populated. It has the highest population density of like anywhere.
Yeah.
And the average lifespan is about like 80 plus years old. The only lady there has 0 medical anything, and she's brought every single person that lives on that island. She's delivered them, and she gives them all her own medical advice and remedies.
There you go.
And yeah,
And then one day,
they're all living healthy.
she's probably passing that knowledge on to her successor, right?
Yeah, of
It's
course.
not like, because if she doesn't, that whole system's going to crash.
Yep.
And it's based on keeping that community healthy, keeping those people together.
I want to take a little pivot from the healthcare and K-Tech. Do you think the gold is in the treasury?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's like a big topic right now, right? Because we have this thing called Fort Knox, and they say that it hasn't been audited in 50 years.
Yep.
Maybe even more. And Elon's been calling like, "Oh, let's do a live stream and live stream Fort Knox for the masses." And my opinion on that Fort Knox live stream is that is a terrible idea. Because if there's no gold or spray painted bricks, we're finished.
She's
Right?
a little too shy.
They find a gold bar, they drill into it, it's just straight fucking
It's just
concrete.
concrete just spinning out like tan.
It's all
Tan
copper
salt.
and silver block.
That's so
not even
funny.
silver.
That'd be so funny, man.
It's all tin.
And that's just, I mean, we haven't audited the most, the U.S. used to be backed by gold.
You know how we got off that standard though?
Yeah, Nixon and his.
1933, we started that, and we said, everybody that owns gold in the United States, you gotta sell it to us. You gotta sell it to your government. You can't own gold. For 40 years, you could not own gold of your own in the United States because they didn't want you to have any sort of, power to yourself.
Yep.
And let's see.
And it was punishable by law.
Yeah, they banned gold ownership in 1933. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially communism. The U.S. is essentially communism in terms of what they did there, because if they back currency by an asset and they put in place laws that you have to do it over, otherwise there will be military force applied to you, then we don't have any free capitalism markets. And they can easily do that again. And nowadays it's even worse because there's no point in trying to resist the system because they have infinite military technology to eliminate any opposing threat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's essentially going on. And there's no way, and I'm not calling for violence, but there's no way that the U.S. government will ever fall apart in that regard for this money system collapse and how much they've destroyed society for future generations because they have the military to always back that up. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the military statistically, there's great people that serve in the military, but statistically those people are the most obedient and they listen and just do. They don't think about it. And I'm not saying that's bad, that's just the nature of what goes on. And what's scary is we have such a strong education system, such a strong system that's been perfected for generations over time, that the military will turn on its own people if the people get truly upset about the money system collapsing, because it affects everyone. And what's crazy is there's just no path forward because even the Trump administration can't stop it. Even Elon Musk has admitted it's so corrupt, it's so big and and so much. They've revealed so much that's
Way too many
disturbing.
layers.
But he's even admitted they
Probably
can't.
just the surface.
Yeah, it's just the surface. He's admitted that he can't even reveal all of it because it would cause chaos. And no matter who's in charge, they're all oligarchs in terms of who they operate, whether it be Trump, Biden, Obama. It doesn't matter. There's just so many factors at play that no matter, the system's just been so old and so refined. There's just too many big players that have so much control that we don't even know about. And it's unfortunate because we're not calling to cause mass chaos, but we have been born into a mess, and we're going to be the ones that have to navigate through it. And in all honesty, you look at human history, it's pretty impressive that this hasn't even happened yet for the US. And I think COVID, I've lost a lot of faith in humanity with COVID, with how quickly everyone just complied and didn't ask questions or didn't think for themselves. And
making 3 shots mandatory is ridiculous.
yeah, no,
for
they
anything.
yeah. And they had everyone on board.
And having young people mandatory for the vaccinations, and I understand it's like a herd immunity thing, you're protecting the older generations, but why put a cost at a younger person's immune system? If I get sick, my immune system is strong enough to beat it and will honestly be stronger beating it on its own without that vaccine, and I'll be more susceptible to overcome other illnesses. So in a sense, I feel like I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot if I'm mandatory getting all these things where it's one thing if I'm immunocompromised and my body can't handle a sickness, then 100% go for it. But there should still be that will in getting stuff like that.
You should be able to go to college without, getting a shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You weren't allowed to go to my school if you didn't have the vaccines. And
going to visit, I had to have my card on me. Show it at that front desk driving through.
Unless you had a religious exemption, which is pretty ridiculous.
And every time it's a religious exemption, it's 9 times out of 10 bullshit. Like, they're just saying it's religious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, the forced vaccination, I mean, people are finally waking up, but the damage is already done. And that goes into my theme of there's disarming across the board going on. And it's not even political. This is the oligarchy I'm talking about. It's not about blue or red. It's not about like what side you are on. That's all an illusion. That's to make you think that you're part of a team and that your team's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
None of these, both Democrats and Republicans, aren't worth fighting for. They're both clowns, and they both have good and bad things within them, and they've constructed it in a way that it flip-flops. So then we have good things about one side that goes on for a few years and really, really bad things about it, and then good things on one side, really good, and really honestly bad things about it too. And they've constructed the viewpoints and opinions on each political side from Democrats and Republicans in a way that no side actually fulfills what the normal person wants, but the normal person gets pushed into one of the corners because it's a means of survival. It's a means of
all for a need for money.
Yep, needs for money, and then
money has become one of our basic needs.
A need for being relevant in society, and also having friends and having like a good social life.
Yep.
Right. If you don't align yourself with one of these corners, especially in California, or even Massachusetts, like if you don't align yourself with one of the sides, you get ostracized. And so they're neutralizing anyone that can think for themselves and deconstruct every viewpoint on an individual basis, not just picking red or blue.
They want you heavily opinionated on completely nothing. If you can completely talk about stupid shit going on all the time, then they have you right where they want you. There's no point in going deeper into stuff.
Exactly. And like statistically, Republicans, the dumbest opinion on Republicans, I think, is the abortion issue. Like, what is a Republican to tell an individual woman what to do with their body? Right? It's an individual. Like, why do individuals care so much about what specific individuals do? And then
about your own life.
And then the Democrats have a terrible opinion on, we should just have mass socialize the Medicare system and the Social Security system should run rampant. when we know firsthand that all these government programs that they enact are just NGOs that launder the money overseas to their special interests.
Yep.
And if we want socialism, they basically want you to disarm yourself. So both sides have just stupid opinions on each end. And any normal person that can individually spot each issue and divide would realize that they're both full of it. And it's not worth fighting for. And that's a hot take. That's going to get me in trouble right here. But it's true. Like, both sides have really, really stupid opinions. And they just push the envelope. And then there's a ton of disarming going on, especially like the firearms stuff. There's been, like, look at the latest executive order on firearms is basically the government just passed a law where they can confiscate any firearm for any reason and applicable to their law. And Trump just signed it. So it's just pretty interesting because they've realized that there's a lot of people in the population that are getting fed up, and they're just going to start disarming people left, right, and center.
They don't want you to have any sort of means of control of your own. So
Yep.
whether that's guns, whether that's, assets like gold, property, stuff like that, they don't want you to own it because that shows you have some sort of control over, what your daily life is, what your
Yep.
thought process is.
Yeah,
The more control they have over you, the more you can't think outside the box. You're just trapped.
Yeah, it's just truly disgusting what's going on with this money system, and it's turned into a game of Monopoly. I guess we can wrap it up here. We've been going on for a while.
Yeah.
But it's just a shame because I think everyone wants peace. I think that's one thing we all agree on. But
Simple living.
yeah, this system has created a complex macro and monetary environment that makes it impossible for us to live simply, and it fuels people to be greedy, and it fuels people to act against one another.
Yep.
Well, yeah, you're forcing them all to play the game. Born to shit, forced to wipe.
Yeah, quite literally. It's crazy, and it's disgusting what's going on. And I think the big thing about this episode, regardless of what you think about what we just said, is just think for yourself.
Make your own opinion.
Make your own opinion.
Don't be a parrot. Don't copy people.
Look at their actions.
Yeah.
Don't listen to their words. Make your own opinions on what you see actually happening, not what you're hearing. And yeah.
And don't let older generations tell you that you're not doing it right, because
don't let them shoot you down.
You've been dealt a bad hand, and it's unfair.
And they really don't know your experiences.
They played a different game. The game
Yeah.
was a lot easier back then.
We've got a lot of updates to
Yeah.
really make this game hard. It's like we're playing Dark Scrolls.
Pay attention to the
Dark
patch
Souls.
notes.
Yeah, and there's also
Yeah. for
the
real.
counter argument to that is like the internet's opened up all these opportunities. Well, it's kind of monopolized just a few individuals to make all of it
Yeah.
and shoot everyone else to zero. And the internet alone has complex algorithms to push down ratings so new people can't explode in popularity unless they are aligned by the people that control the internet. So the internet is controlled in itself.
Yeah.
So every single part of this, from Medicare to the internet to finance to military to politics to whatever, they all work together.
Yep.
And
It's tight,
at the end of the day, 99.9% of people are going to get screwed over, and 0.1% will win.
Yep. I
And
think that'll do it.
So
So
that-
hope
Hope
you
we
guys
don't
enjoyed a
catch your
little.
eyes.
Hope you enjoyed a little bite of the apple, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Take care.
Peace.
See ya.